Hey, what's up, 8th graders? This is Miss Ludwig. Today we are doing our third section of notes on bacteria in our microbiology unit. These notes are on page 6 in your lab notebook. Bacteria are one of the 5 major pathogens that we're talking about during this unit, which means they can cause disease, but we will actually find out that not all bacteria are bad bacteria. In fact, most bacteria are actually good bacteria that help keep you healthy. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the characteristics of bacteria. So first of all, what are bacteria? We've talked about bacteria before because they're prokaryotic cells. Pro equals no. That's the little memory device that I taught you to remember the difference between prokaryotic cells that have no nucleus and eukaryotic cells which do have a nucleus. So prokaryotic cells, which are bacteria, are very simple organisms. They are single-celled, which means they're just one cell. They do not have a nucleus. Even though they don't have a nucleus, they do, however, contain DNA, the genetic material. The genetic material inside a bacteria cell actually just kind of floats around in the center of the cell in the cytoplasm. Some bacteria also have a flagellum or flagella if you have more than one. Those are those long whip-like tail type things that help the bacteria move. So as you can see right here, this bacteria has quite a few flagella. Bacteria don't have a lot of membrane-bound organelles, but they do have a couple of organelles. They do have ribosomes, which are the little dots inside the cell. Those are there to make proteins, just like in eukaryotic cells. And they also have cytoplasm, which is that gel-like fluid in the center that kind of holds things together and fills up the cell. There are tons of different types of bacteria, but bacteria are kind of classified by their different shapes. And so here on the screen I have some different pictures. You have those same pictures on page 6 in black and white. And they have different names for the different shapes of bacteria. So I'm going to go through the different shapes, and you're going to need to copy down the fancy names that are left blank. And then in a moment, you're also going to have to label each picture. Notice they don't go in the same order. So make sure you're labeling the pictures accurately with the specific name of those shapes of bacteria. So the first type of bacteria we have are coccus, which means round. As you can see, each little bacterial cell, this is magnified under a microscope, is kind of a round circular shape. We also have bacillus bacteria, which are more rod-shaped. They're kind of elongated. We also have spirillum, which are spiral-shaped. Vibrio are more like V-shaped. They kind of have a V shape to them. And then lastly, we have the spirochaete, which are a tight spiral or more like a kind of a corkscrew. It's a little bit of a tighter spiral than the spirillum. So go ahead and take a second. You might need to pause the video. Look at the pictures that are in your notes and make sure you label them properly. While you're doing that, I'd also like you to put a little star next to 3 of them. I'd like you to put a star next to the round, this top 3 here, the round, the bacillus, and or rod-shaped, and then the spirillum or spiral-shaped. These are the 3 most common shapes of bacteria. All right, so how do bacteria reproduce? How do we make more bacteria? Bacteria actually reproduce in more than one way. The first is asexually, which means there's only one parent. The offspring, or the cells that come from the original cell, are identical to the parent. So they're like little mini clones. They are exactly the same. The process of asexual reproduction in bacteria is called binary fission. So binary fission is where one cell divides to form 2 identical cells. So we kind of have an example of that going on right here. And then the second way is sexual reproduction, where we actually have 2 parents creating a different offspring. When I say different, I mean genetically different. Each parent bacteria has its own set of DNA, and when they share that DNA, there's a new cell that is made, and it has different DNA from each of its parents, a little bit of both, just like you and I. And the form of sexual reproduction in bacteria is called conjugation. One bacterium transfers its genetic material to another through a pilus. And right here is an example of that. So we have one little bacteria cell over here, and there's a separate one over here, and they use these little string-like structures called a pilus, and they extend them, and then they transfer the DNA through this. Okay, and so something also that we talk about whenever we talk about bacterial reproduction is the J-curve graph. So if I were to take a petri dish with some bacteria and put one little bacteria in there, or just a few little bacteria, and then I went ahead and I timed every certain amount of time and then counted how many bacteria I had. If I graphed it, it would look like this. It almost looks like the letter J, which is why we call it a J-curve graph. So what it is, this is representing something we call exponential growth. So you might want to write that down right next to the graph that's also in your notes. It looks just like this. Exponential growth means that bacteria reproduce really, really fast, as you can see from this little GIF here. All right. On my graph, I have time in hours down here, and then I have the number of bacteria in thousands along the side. Okay, so when bacteria reproduce exponentially, let's say we start out with one bacteria, and in 20 minutes time, now I have 2 bacteria. I've doubled the amount of bacteria. And then those 2 little bacteria, 20 minutes later, have doubled again, so now I have 4 bacteria. And then 20 minutes later, now I have 8. So it doesn't seem like we're getting that many bacteria really fast, but when you start adding thousands of bacteria, so I have 2,000 bacteria now, and then in 20 minutes later, now I have 4,000 bacteria. That's how bacterial colonies grow ridiculously fast. It's through exponential growth, where they basically double at a certain time interval. All right, obtaining food and energy. Bacteria get their energy through cellular respiration. We just talked about this in our molecular biology unit. So they have to take their food, and then they have to go through the process of cellular respiration to make energy for themselves. Some bacteria are autotrophs. When we talked about photosynthesis, I think I mentioned the word autotroph to you. Autotroph means that they make their own food. So some bacteria are similar to plants in the fact that they make their own food. They use the sun, similar to plants, or sometimes there's a process called chemosynthesis where some bacteria actually feed on chemicals in their environment and they can make their own food that way. Later, when we talk about oceans, we're going to talk about hydrothermal vents down at the very bottom of the seafloor that spew these toxic chemicals in really hot water. And we've actually found life down there where there is no light at all. These bacteria thrive on the chemicals that are coming out of these vents out of the ocean floor, and they're making their own food. Other bacteria are heterotrophs, which is the opposite. So heterotrophs means that these bacteria have to consume something else in order to get their food. Sometimes that might be meat, milk, or bread. So if you see that your meat is past its if we see that meat is past its expiration date in the refrigerator and it starts to turn a funky color, that's probably because bacteria are munching on it. Now you can't see them because they're microscopic, but they are munching on your food. If you have moldy bread, same thing. If milk is curdled, same thing. Those bacteria are munching on your food and turning it into something else, which is a chemical change. Some bacteria are actually decomposers, so they break down decaying matter. So there's a lot of bacteria. They're one of the most important decomposers on Earth. Any kind of dead leaves right now, it's fall and all the leaves are falling, and bacteria are all over them, breaking them down and returning those nutrients back to the soil and kind of continuing the life cycle of all the things that grow out of the ground. Also, dead animals on the side of the road. They have to get decayed somehow, and that happens through the help of some decomposer bacteria. So, I mentioned in the beginning of this video that not all bacteria are bad. We always think of bacteria and we associate that with germs and pathogens and think, ooh, bacteria make you sick, but that's not always the case. In fact, more bacteria are actually good for the environment and good for your health than the bad ones. So here are a few different things, the different roles of bacteria in nature that we'll go over and kind of see how they can be helpful in life. So the first one is decomposing bacteria. As I just mentioned, they can break down chemicals in dead leaves. Other recycling bacteria help plants survive, like we talked about the nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle, there's a certain type of bacteria on the roots of types of plants called legumes. And when nitrogen gets into the soil, those bacteria actually change that nitrogen into a different form of nitrogen so that the plants can use it to make proteins and grow big and strong. Another useful thing that we can do with bacteria is actually we can clean up the environment with them. Not just decompose dead, rotting material, but also when we have oil spills, man-made issues that we've done, if they have an oil spill in the ocean, we can actually take bacteria and help clean them up. It's called bioremediation, which we will talk about a little bit later in biotechnology. But the bacteria actually feed on, they eat the oil and then get rid of it out of the ocean. So that's awesome. Another way that bacteria are super helpful, autotrophic bacteria, again, which means they make their own food, we're actually responsible for adding oxygen to the Earth's atmosphere. We're going to talk about this again way at the end in our evolution and Earth history units. But yeah, bacteria were actually autotrophic, making their own food, releasing oxygen, and that's part of the way that our atmosphere got full of oxygen. There are bacteria all over your body. They are part of your microbiome, and they are super important. They actually help you stay healthy. So some bacteria, tons of bacteria, are in your guts, in your intestines, and they help you digest and break down your food. They also kind of help keep other microbes that might be in there at bay so they don't make you sick. Sometimes if you have a bacterial infection, let's say you have strep throat, and your doctor tells you to take an antibiotic. An antibiotic is a specific medicine that is used to treat only bacterial infections. It's meant to kill bacteria. The problem with some kind of broad spectrum antibiotics, is what we call them, is that they don't target just the bad bacteria. They kill all the bacteria, or a lot of the bacteria, even the good bacteria. And what happens is when we kill some of that good bacteria that's in our digestive systems, number one, it allows other microbes that the bacteria kind of help fight off because they're in competition with them. They let them grow, and then sometimes you can get other infections like yeast infections. And also sometimes it just gives your whole digestive system some problems because they're not helping to break down and release some of the nutrients from your food and do some of the jobs in your digestive system that are so important. And then lastly, some bacteria actually help you make your food. So we talked a moment ago about your rotting hamburger in your refrigerator and the bacteria are munching away. Some bacteria, good bacteria, are actually used to make certain foods, like cheese, yogurt, cheese, yogurt, pickles, and sauerkraut, I was thinking of, where you take cabbage and it actually has to kind of ferment, we call it, or rot a little bit, and the bacteria help turn it and give it kind of that sour taste, which a lot of people actually like. I think that's it. Okay, so main takeaway of this, if I ask you later what the main takeaway is, all bacteria are not bad. Most of them are actually good and very helpful in nature and in your own bodies. All right, thanks for watching. Make sure you got all your notes done on page 6. See you later.